for anyone tuning in, obviously today we are going to be talking all things kind of technical assessments, interviews in terms of both the questioning side of things, what do we like, what don't we like, as well as looking at the actual way that candidates can be assessed, looking at technical testing, and the various tasks that can be done within an interview. So I think we'll give it until 3 minutes past, and then obviously we can start off with some introductions and see how we get on from there. Great. First question up, we're going to actually be looking at a technical Q&A. So everyone nice prepared for that. But yeah, let's start with some introductions. Yeah. Cool. So I'm Phil Kell. I'm head of talent here at HackerJob. Obviously responsible for ensuring that candidates have the best experience possible on the platform, and obviously day to day we're dealing with hundreds of different interview processes, different formats of calls, tech tests, all sorts of things. So I feel like we've got some great insights to give on these topics. Just go around the Zoom. So Mark, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Carlton. I'm talent acquisition here at Direct Line Group. Insurance, areas that I look after within the business include architecture, security, DevOps, and others. I'm very much looking forward to taking your questions today.
Fantastic. Tom?
Yeah, nice to see you all again. Tom Jackson, just being recruited via the HackerJob platform. Yeah, and happy to answer the questions as well.
Great. And Alex, be good to know a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, so pretty much the same. I've also been recently recruited through the HackerJob platform, and I'll be starting next week. So I just thought I'd join the panel to discuss it a bit today.
Fantastic. Congratulations on the new role. Excellent. And Hannah?
Hi, I'm Hannah Mcdougall. I'm the Talent Acquisition Manager here at QA Limited. So I look after areas of our business which focus a lot on early careers, but we do have, experienced hires. So hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions in regards to technical recruitment at all levels.
Fantastic. Great. So I'll just get the presentation up and then we can start.
I'm here too.
Oh, sorry, Alan. my bad. Yeah, Alan, sorry.
So I'm Alan. I'm the discipline lead at Auden. Just basically a new bank being built. I came through the HackerJob platform the end of last year and started with Auden in January.
Phil, you're on mute.
Apologies for that. So just a few bits of housekeeping to start off with. So when asking questions, please ask them in the Q&A section. You will be invited to a new Zoom webinar each day. Invites will be sent out in the afternoon from hello@HackerJob. And yeah, please do tell your friends about us. So we've got a YouTube series, HackerJob HQ, where all of our past TRTs are hosted. We have obviously the HackerJob Twitter handle. You can catch up with us on LinkedIn as well. And please use the hashtags, #TRT or #Tech Recruitment Takeover. Excellent. So in terms of what we're basing today's session on, so we surveyed 2,000 different kind of technical engineers across the UK, and obviously we're looking to share the key findings on those every day. In terms, and as I said, you'll receive the latest release of the report each day before the full report is shared next week. Today, obviously, we're looking at the mastering the interview process with Hannah, Mark, Alex, Thomas, and Alan and myself. And if you are involved in all of these sessions, if you attend, 4 out of the 5 of these sessions, you'll be invited to the HackerJob Wine Club. It's a completely free virtual event with us, and you'll have a chance to meet your TRT peers and learn about wine with a professional sommelier. Cool. So diving into the session today. So the first thing we're going to look at is the interview tasks that best assess a candidate's skill set. So going to start with a fairly open question. So I guess going straight to into one of the candidates. So Tom, in terms of when you're interviewing, what do you feel is the best way to kind of assess a candidate's skill set? What sort of tasks in the interview do you like?
Yeah, some really interesting ideas from last time we met up. I think especially from listening to Mark and Hannah about how the interview process isn't always judgmental, and sometimes the company wants to give you a chance. So I think firstly, like I really like that this career and this job role has tests, because I wouldn't be doing it if it didn't have tests for starters.
Yeah.
But I think it's difficult to strike the balance between consuming a lot of the candidate's time and actually like assessing them properly, if that makes sense. So I guess for me the important things are language agnostic is really nice.
Yeah.
And potentially with one of the people you're going to be working with and sort of as part of the interview process would be preferable.
Fantastic, excellent. So I think when we were surveying our engineers, so 64% of engineers believe that technical Q&A is the best way to assess technical people. So it aligns there with kind of what Tom was saying. Alan, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that in terms of what your opinion is on how a candidate is best assessed.
So I've kind of sat at both sides, both looking for a job and assessing candidates. Both cases, I prefer a good conversation, and that's a conversation that flows two ways so that the company has been open, quite honest, and quite clear about what they want, what they expect, and kind of just treating a candidate's CV like an onion, just peeling back the layers, going deep, finding those bits of interest, and just having that good conversation. And it's more about trying to gel. Now that I've been on the side and actually building teams, it's more about looking for people that will fit in with what you've got and will work together. You're not always looking for that rock star. Sometimes what you've got is you need somebody like a line player that'll just keep things moving on in certain services, and sometimes you do need those people that will come in and break new ground. So you have to vary how you approach things based on that. In terms of actual technical tests, not a massive fan of being given some kind of coding challenge to take away, because it takes up quite a bit of time sometimes. Sometimes they're very contrived, and that's doing it as well as assessing it, because you end up assessing the same thing over and over. It just bores you, and you end up with almost a scripted interview, and you don't get at a candidate's personality, which is really what you want to get at as well, which is as important as the tech skills, really. And the other thing as well is, like, I was lucky enough to work with a SaaS company, Teamwork, who had a really great culture. And it's that culture you've got is probably as important as any interview process, because if you've got your culture right, you open up the range of people you can onboard and what you can do with them.
Fantastic, excellent. And then, yeah, looking at the client side of things. So over to you first, Mark. What does your hiring process look like currently? You know, do you see Q&A and actually having that conversation as a big and important part of it, or do you rely more on the kind of technical testing side and those kinds of tangible tests to test a candidate's skills?
Thanks for that. I'd like to say one or the other, but I'm not. We use a mixture of methods to assess skills. I think it does depend on the role itself and the hiring manager's preferences. Really, some hiring managers they are kind of stuck in the way that they want. For example, a coding exercise completed if, for example, the role is Python heavy coding. Some managers may say, well, actually, we do have coding in our role, but we want to focus more on their candidate's AWS knowledge experience. So we will ask multiple choice questions. And some managers do a code live. So kind of during an interview, they'll ask for a candidate to complete an exercise there and then, and it'll be more interactive. So I'm sorry I can't say it's one or the other, but I guess the main thing to take from this is we're looking to give the candidate the best opportunity to showcase themselves. So it's not the outcome will not purely be based on the results of your coding exercise, your AWS multiple choice quiz, or the Code Live pair programming, whatever you want to call it. We'll take into consideration your CV and also discussions with you. But if you're asking me personally, if I may, the best way to assess skills, in my opinion, is a bit of a hybrid approach, because again, I would hate for a candidate not to progress in a process based on a minor point, whereas they do have that ability to get through. So I like the shorter technical exercises. Anything kind of really 20, 30, 40 minutes is perfect. Anything more than that, I think you're asking candidate a bit too much, take a bit too much time out of their personal time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some companies, I've heard companies come in the attitude of, well, it does test the commitment, if they're willing to commit 4-8 hours on a weekend to this company, and that is obviously fair enough. I think if you're in the Apple, the Google kind of echelons, then perhaps that is an attitude you can go in with. But recruitment's a competitive market. Even if people are very interested in your company, the fact that you're asking them to commit, a big chunk of their weekend or their evenings to work on a test just to find a job, to assess commitment, personally, I don't think is best way.
I think to say to test commitment is a bit misleading, really, isn't it? Because you've got a candidate who could be interviewing 7 interviews, and they've got a family, perhaps at home, 3 young children, however many, and they're obviously going to be more committed to the children and their family in that spare time that they have, because they've got the day job as well. So I think the test commitment quote is not fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, Alexandra, obviously you've very recently gone through an interview process yourself, probably very fresh in the mind. So what were your experiences going through that? I'm assuming you will have had a technical conversation. Was there a technical test involved as well, and kind of how did you feel about the differences?
Yeah, so there was a technical short interview, well, about an hour interview, and then after that I received a technical test. And in my eyes, it was good for me to have that, because I'm not as senior and was coming from completely different industry not so long ago in like social care. So I'm still like pretty new. Yeah. So it was a good opportunity for me to like demonstrate that that I would be able to do the tasks coming in the job.
Excellent. Fantastic. And then finally, Hannah, to get your take as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with Mark on a lot of this. It depends on the level of individual and the role that we're looking for at our early career stages. We do use things like strengths-based assessments, and then we also have sort of cognitive assessments, which is more sort of numerical and critical reasoning, because we're looking for the right kind of attitude and aptitude, which is then followed, by a Q&A. So, so that's the really important part of our interviews, to make sure that people are, understand the opportunities. I guess when we get to sort of a slightly more senior level, maybe say Sophia level 4 and above, we would tend to still have that initial Q&A, which is more about aptitude, attitude, behavior, strengths. We want to make sure that people understand our opportunity and that they're sort of engaged and wanting to work for our business. But then at that level, we would tend to have maybe a second stage interview, which is more likely to be with one of our subject matter experts, which is more likely to be on the technical side. So we actually tend to do less technical testing at a more senior level, but we have more in-depth sort of Q&As around someone's experience, where they'll be asked more technical questions kind of on the spot. So I think, Yeah, I mean, the technical sort of Q&A is definitely a really big part of our interview process. It just depends on the level of individual and the level of roles that people are applying for. So a mix, again, like Mark said, a mix of things that we use.
Yeah, and I think as well the volume and the scale that you guys are working at definitely impacts that. There's a need to kind of cut that down a little bit.
Yeah, our early careers level, it's really important that we get sort of engagement up front with some of the assessments that we do along sort of strengths and then sort of critical and numerical reasoning before we get to sort of the face-to-face interview side to make sure. And we do have high volumes at that early careers level, so that for us is really important that we get that engagement. But again, we need to be really careful about how long we're expecting people to take to do the test. So I think, as Mark said, we don't, we've got a couple of different tests. Each of them would take no more than sort of an hour, maybe half an hour to an hour, because we understand that people are in other processes and we want to keep people engaged. And I think sending people away to do sort of quite significant prep work and technical tests isn't something that we personally use, but we have done previously, and we found that we didn't have the same engagement. So yeah, that's how we do it.
Fantastic. Cool. So I think we'll have a look at some of the audience Q&A, if we can get it to open. Apologies. And so just to pick up on some of the kind of follow-ups there. So I think just going over to you, Tom. Obviously, you mentioned that various different types of questions within the interview. Do you feel like, do you kind of prep situations for kind of situational questions? So are you going in expecting to be asked about particular examples from your career history? And if so, do you go in with those examples kind of in your mind already?
I think often, because I'm on the more junior end, they're more interested in how I fit in with their tech stack. So it will typically be on their tech stack, not necessarily with my experience.
Yeah.
And they probably won't even have asked me to the interview if I don't mesh with that. But yeah, I think prepping for situational stuff is really important because, for example, I've gone for a lot of React interviews where they won't ask a single question about React. They'll ask everything about JavaScript, for example, which is obviously very related. But I think the company's particular need for a software engineer, which is a pretty vague title anyway, can often be massively different. So you've got to kind of fit in with whatever it is they want, I suppose.
Fantastic, excellent. And then Alan, when it comes to the interview questions themselves, do you discern anything from a company based on the actual questions they ask you? So are you kind of interviewing them while they're interviewing you?
Yep. If I find it's very textbook type of Googled questions, the interview is going to end very soon. And it has done. For me, that point when you get the face-to-face, so you've probably been through recruiters, they may be external recruiters, you've had a hard sell. This is the first time to actually sit and talk to somebody that's probably doing the job with you. You're either going to report into or work alongside. So you really want to get to that point where you're completely clear that what is it they're actually looking for in terms of tech. What have they got? How mature are they technically? Because, like I say, there's different levels, and kind of as you get further on in your career, you kind of realize what level you're at. So I tend to favor early stages. We actually get your hands dirty at quite a lot of stuff. So if they're further on than that, it's probably the wrong place. So yeah.
Excellent, great. And the flip side of that, over to the client side. So Mark, I mean, does the technical conversation, so when you're actually digging into the tech side of things, does that tell you something about the culture and the character of that particular person?
I don't think so.
Nope.
We learn more about the individual through our kind of our values-based and cultural interview, and with the kind of competency-based questions, I think those questions and more of the personal questions, that's where you get more of an idea of the candidate and how they would fit within the business from a cultural perspective. So technically, No. And I guess I could say, we could have, and we have had candidates who've scored very, very highly technically in the past, but from the kind of the values-based competency questions and the cultural fit questions, they've missed the mark hugely. Then they wouldn't progress, and we'd get the feedback as to why. But I don't think it cannot be a given that because you're 100% right technically, you're 100% right for the organization. It's getting the right person in the right role at the right time.
Fantastic, excellent. And then just a little bit on kind of prepping for the interview itself. So Alex, when you were going along to interviews, did you have a list of questions you would have for the company? Do you see it as like a two-way street? Did you want to come out with that extra bit of information as well as obviously providing that information about yourself?
Yeah, so for each interview I've done, I've had some questions, like for example, around support that new hires would receive, like in the onboarding process and also ongoing, and just to find out what the sort of culture is like at the team as well. So yeah, just what life would be like as an employee at the company, and also what makes like them want to work at the company as well, the ones who are interviewing me.
Fantastic. And then, yeah, over to you as well, Hannah, on that. So I guess the flip side of that, when candidates do come in and they want to know all about QA and they've got some great questions kind of prepared, is that something that you'll kind of see in a positive light?
Yeah, absolutely. We want people who want to work for us, and we want to see that level of engagement regardless of the role that they're applying for. We hope that sort of during the recruitment process that someone has provided enough information that they're already engaged. But yes, clarifying anything that you want to know, career progression, whatever it might be, and really though that sort of the questions at the end can also prompt further conversations, because it really sometimes the questions that people ask, it really gives an insight into their motivations and what they want to achieve in their career. So yes, I mean, having it's tricky to, yes, it's good to prepare questions, but don't just ask the prepared questions, the questions that everyone asks. Ask questions that are actually relevant for you. We have interviewers that go, well, actually, because we've had this Q&A chat, at the end, some people don't have that many questions because we've covered it in the interview, and that's fine. But it is more about that engagement and trying to understand what someone wants from their career, because we have to make sure it's a fit on both ends. We want people who are going to come and work at QA and progress in QA and be here for a long time. So understanding someone's motivations and passion for technology and what they want to achieve is really important, because there are so many opportunities that you can feed people into different routes, I guess. So yeah, absolutely, having questions that are relevant to you rather than, I'm just going to ask a question because I feel like I should, is probably more important. If you're just going to ask a question that you feel like you should have rather they didn't, so it's finding that sort of balance of getting the right information.
Fantastic, excellent. And then just to follow up on that, we've had a good question come in on the Q&A side of things. So how do you ensure that the culture fit questions you ask aren't just producing kind of clones of the people that you already have in the business? So like, obviously we all want diverse teams. So how do you ensure that, yes, you get the right people that fit the culture, but you're not just finding, the exact same type of person over and over again?
I did see that question, and it's a great question. I think really we have to build our recruitment process to be incredibly unconscious of bias in the first instance. So if I can give some examples, that we work with a behavioural science company who's actually defined some of the strengths that make a great consultant for QA, for example. Now, the strengths that make a great software developer in a different company might look slightly different. So we actually do those sort of strengths-based assessments right at the beginning. So it's not just necessarily based on a hiring manager's opinion because, you know, oh, great, we like him, you know, that kind of stuff, because he's like a clone, you know, of who he is. It's really important to get that diverse. So I think it's just really important not to do that, and to have a diverse recruitment process and have a really open and honest recruitment process. So the way that we do that is by sort of strengths-based questions, cognitive reasoning questions, then followed, you know, by a Q&A, and it might just not be with the recruitment team. It is likely to be by a number of different people that might have, you know, different opinions of what makes a great consultant. So but it is a challenge, you know, and I think it's a challenge for lots of companies. As Mark said, we have end clients that just like this process and they want to ask these questions and they are looking for specific answers. So I guess it's about educating from a recruiter's point of view, educating our end clients, our hiring managers, about what's the impact of that and why that's important.
Fantastic, excellent. And then we've got another good question just around the technical testing side of things. So Alan, when it comes to you, just obviously you've got experience from both a hiring perspective and from obviously being a candidate. If you were to set a technical challenge, what do you think is the kind of optimal length of time someone should spend on it? And then secondly, what's your opinion on sending out technical challenges before candidates have had the chance to speak to anyone? So as your first stage, sending out that technical test.
I don't like sending it out, to be honest, because it's who have they spoke to, especially if it's an external recruitment agency. They haven't got it from the horse's mouth. So I tend to be protective of my own time and respectful of others. So normally what I've done in the past is I was recruiting mostly in and around Belfast, so I actually would have met candidates for an initial coffee, take them through what we're doing, what we're looking for, trying to assess if there is a match. Then we did have quite a small take home that was probably roughly about an hour's worth of work for a reasonable developer. And at that stage, if I've met them and I think, yeah, we'll progress, and if they're interested in what we're doing, I'll reassure them. I'll tell them what's coming, what the expectation is, and sort of, especially if you're dealing with more junior people, you kind of you level set for them and be sort of clear on what we're trying to do for this and why.
And why? Okay, excellent, awesome. Yeah, and I think that is a great point, to be honest. I think, you know, making sure that people have the clarity in knowing what they're doing is relevant to the job. I think that's some other feedback that we've had quite often from candidates. So maybe they've been given a challenge during the interview process where there was literally no relevance to either the tech that was using or the actual problems that they would face on a day-to-day. So if you can make that challenge more kind of real life and real world and prepare them for what they're gonna face, that's a great way of looking at it. Fantastic. And then we've had one more Q&A and then we'll jump on to our second section. So I think this is one for you, Mark. So what's the feeling around people kind of the dichotomy between people applying for roles and you having to kind of search for candidates? So I'm guessing this has come from an internal recruiter. So what it says is, we're under the belief that the talent gets searched for. How can we encourage people to approach us instead? Is this a realistic goal to have? So I guess more around the branding side of things.
Sorry, so can you just go back in what you're asking here?
So essentially what it is how can we increase the amount of people that approach us as a company? So how can we increase our inbound applications rather than, it sounds like this company is doing a lot of kind of external outreach? Yeah,
sure. So I mean, I guess a lot of the stuff we're doing here at Direct Line Group involves our recruitment marketing team. So they're putting together materials for the external market. The usual networking. I think networking is becoming even more important today. That the market, it is saturated with companies and recruiters looking for the right talent, and we're all we're all fishing really from a small pool. I think thinking outside the box with regards to the platforms you use. So we've got businesses, be it the businesses like myself or the recruiters using the job boards. I don't need to go through the names, but it's the usual job board, so you get the same candidate flow. But then if you start thinking outside and other platforms that you can use, and let's just use HackerJob as an example for finding these candidates. These are candidates that have been pre-screened. They've been matched against a number of our roles, and essentially they're ready to go. And we may not necessarily have come across these candidates before, or it may have taken us some time to get there, and then the candidates would be elsewhere. So I think a lot of it, and this isn't to sound patronizing, I hope it doesn't, it's just kind of thinking outside the box and going down the untrodden path, really trying something a bit different.
Fantastic. And that's a nice segue into our next section, actually. So 20% of respondents to the survey mentioned that they found their next job using an online jobs platform. So Mark, just to continue with you very quickly, have you seen a rise in direct applications due to the pandemic, or has it stayed fairly flat compared to your previous numbers?
Yeah, so if we think back to March time last year, yeah, there was, I'd say March, and then the kind of first 4 months really of the pandemic, there was a massive drop in direct applications and candidates responding to us reaching out, and you can basically just put that down to a bit of fear and I guess trepidation with the market, because if you put yourself in the candidate shoes, you're in a role and you're comfortable in the role and you're secure, and then someone comes and knocks the door and you join a new business, and you might have that underlying feeling of, hang on a minute, if I join a new business, I'm the last person in, and if they decide to make cuts, I could end up being the first out, to put it bluntly, I guess. So first 4 months there was a massive dip, and then it started to pick up when there's more of an understanding as to how the market was working, how employers were working. We all kind of adapted very quickly, I think, as employers, with the remote working and having our colleagues fully equipped to work from home, and then that just saw a rise in activity and assurance from the market. So from the initial dip, it's a rise, and if you look at it now, it's business as usual all round, and actually we're finding a greater response and increase in applications because of the flexibility around remote working. And if you can't offer fully remote, part remote, but it's still giving that increase in interest.
Yeah, and I think that's something that definitely correlates with what we're seeing on our side. I think interviews sent February on February was up 400%. So we're definitely starting to see that recovery filter in. But Hannah, it'd be interesting to get your take on that as well. Like, what did you guys see over the last kind of year?
Yeah, I mean, we had a vast increase in direct applications throughout sort of the first lockdown. I think we were in a unique position because we are, a training company, a development company. We have that early careers where people can come in and retrain. We were finding a lot of people that may have been directly affected, their job has been directly affected, and they're going, well, what do we do now? Let's have a look at roles in technology. However, like Mark, actually sort of seeing them sort of through our recruitment funnel, and actually sort of starting with us, we did see a bit of an increase in percentage, but not significant until a bit more recently, when people feel a little bit more comfortable about actually taking that next step. It's nice to look and it's nice to apply and maybe go away and have a think about it. So that's at the early careers level. If I'm being honest, our more experienced roles, there is a digital skills gap for experienced people in various different technologies. I don't think that's ever going to go away, you know, at the moment, and therefore we didn't see a significant increase in what we were doing. However, we did see that there were some people that perhaps we'd networked with and been approached that they were thinking, actually, maybe this is a good time, you know, it depends what was happening with their business. So yeah, I mean, I think we saw something like threefold the amount of applications coming into our early careers in the first maybe 5 or 6 months, which, you know, from a business point of view is great that we can offer those opportunities, and we were still in a, you know, a reasonably unique position where we had those opportunities to offer. And what we've found based on that is we now actually have quite a diverse workforce, people that maybe wouldn't have considered getting into technology before, maybe they'd done something completely different. So that's been a real benefit for us, you know, as a business.
Fantastic, excellent. And now coming over to you guys who've had the experience, obviously looking for a job very recently. So Tom, start with you. What's your kind of preferred method of finding a job? What were the various different channels or approaches you tried in your most recent job search?
Yeah, so historically I've just used Google because it captures all the job sites. So, and I think, yeah, recruiters use like a really diverse range, and often they post the same job on like all the different job boards anyway. So it's just a nice way of like Google filters stuff out. It's pretty clever. And yeah, recently during the pandemic, kind of local recruitment really dried up around me, and I started looking at platforms like HackerJob, which yeah, obviously yielded success. So that's kind of how I looked.
Fantastic. And so were a lot of the opportunities you end up looking at during this job search kind of fully remote or kind of very, very low kind of on-site time?
Yeah, basically I had to broaden my search because I live in like the Suffolk, Norfolk area, which is not tech capital of the world by any stretch. So I had to sort of broaden my search. So, you know, remote was a massive bonus because it meant I wouldn't potentially have to relocate as far, or yeah. Yeah,
and that's definitely something we've seen on our side as well. I think, you know, the volume of remote roles we've had on the platform has gone up 20-30% since the start of the pandemic. Alan, coming over to you. So what are your kind of your preferred methods of job searching?
It's kind of a mix. Like the last job I had before this one, teamwork. It was a direct reach out, and the reach out was I was running a Go user group, so I got on their radar because of that. That was in the area, so we got talking. Then during the pandemic, I changed once, and that was through friends dragging me in recommendations. And then kind of was working remote. An hour reached out from HackerJob, so through LinkedIn. So mostly it's LinkedIn. I'll keep an eye on. I reached out, talked me through what HackerJob was. So I said, yeah, I'll give it a go. And it's actually quite nice because you get a lot of very targeted jobs very quick. And yeah, I found Tash from Auden reached out, and yeah, that's why I'm here.
So it sounds like, you know, you're trying to avoid the noise essentially. You know, you'll leverage your own networks and you'll look at like more targeted approaches rather than that approach of spam.
Yeah. It's targeted. I've come along quite a bit now writing code, made a few mistakes and a few successes. So I know what I'm looking for now, and mostly that'll come from somebody I know or something will reach out in LinkedIn. And when it comes in LinkedIn, it's always the ones you'll reply back to seem like they've actually looked at what you have on LinkedIn and have read a personal message. If it doesn't feel personal, it's probably just going to get deleted right away.
Yeah, fantastic. All about that target approach. Couldn't agree more. Excellent. And then Alex, it'd be really interesting to get your take on it. Obviously, again, very recent job search, but maybe a little bit of a different situation, moving across careers. What was your experience? How did you find it? Kind of, yeah, coming into a completely different recruitment marketplace, and what kind of channels did you try? Just on mute there, I think, Alex. No worries.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I was actually working in like social care, and just around that time, I started to see these like tutorial ads, maybe in like YouTube or something. So then I had a hand at like making a little website and just looking at into some development things. And then I looked for a role that involved a little bit of that website editing and some infrastructure things as well. And then looked to go into training into DevOps after, and now this current role as well. So I found it quite helpful, the assessment process that I went through. And I think I'll take this opportunity to answer a question. I think that's in the question and answer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This one here. So the process that I went through with interviews for this particular role, I think Simon has asked this, Simon Murray, was that first of all, we had like an hour interview technically, where they just asked, you know, some simple things, and was simple to medium in difficulty. Then off the success of that, they decided to send me a technical test, and that took a few hours for me to do. And that was because I had to research some of the things as well that I hadn't come across. So that just took a bit extra time. But that was good for me, because I think if that was done in real time, I might have struggled to complete it. Yeah. And yeah, so that gave me an opportunity to do that. And then the final interview was, I think it was 3 hours, and we were just doing some live exercises and also some whiteboarding, just like explaining and drawing things on a whiteboard, and also just talking a bit about my solution for the take-home test. And as for the preferred methods of finding a job, I liked all of them: LinkedIn, job boards like CV Library and so on, and then obviously being approached by HackerJob, and there was another similar job board to HackerJob that I got approached on as well. So I like all those methods, because sometimes being busy for these things, I mightn't have time to make a lot of phone calls out, so getting them in was quite helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, particularly when you're making that first move into tech, I think, you know, going at it with a wide approach and seeing what's out there on various different sources definitely makes a lot of sense. Interestingly, you touched there on obviously the whiteboarding and the kind of hands-on. How did you find the difference between those? Obviously, whiteboarding is a little bit more collaborative, probably talking through things as you go in. What was your preferred approach?
Yeah, so because some of these concepts I was going into deeply, like more for the first time, it was a bit difficult sometimes to think of it and write it at the same time. And also perhaps with the paired programming or the supervised programming at the end, just like being under the scrutiny at the same time as having to think of the solutions to the tech challenge was a bit challenging. But overall, I guess it shows that I could work with the potential team members and just do it that way. But I think it was the whiteboarding challenges were okay compared with what I've heard certain other candidates having to go through, like Google and so on. So I think it wasn't like that complex. So yeah.
Excellent. So I think that touches on a really interesting point there, which is kind of making sure the candidate feels comfortable. So I think when you are going through something like pair programming, I think there's a difference between kind of feeling like someone's breathing down your neck and like looking over your shoulder, or someone's actually, you know, working alongside you to solve that challenge. And it does actually bring us on very nicely to our final kind of stat. So only 13% of respondents that completed the survey had completed a pair programming exercise in their most recent career search. In terms of your guys' take on that, so I think again, start with you, Alan. What's your thoughts on pair programming as an exercise within an interview? Because I know you said you've worked with it in the past as well.
I've used it a lot in the past, and not just at the junior end. I've used it seniors, basically knocking each other's code into shape. It's good. Like you have to leave the ego at the door at that point. I'm on the fence with it on an interview. I've done one. It was okay. It's fine. My personal hang up would be if I was doing a paired program of the same problem over and over, I'm going to get bored, and it's not going to be fair on a candidate. Would be one of my hang ups. Having said that, yeah, it's better than just leaving people to whiteboard and not really interacting with them, it is closer to what you're actually going to do.
Fantastic, excellent. And Tom, what's your take on it? I'm not sure if you actually went through pair programming during the interview. If not, would it be something that you would kind of enjoy doing in an interview situation, do you feel?
Yeah, it's not something I did for the role I'm going into, but it's something I've done a lot of in other interviews. Yeah, so I actually think it's kind of the best kind of assessment for me, because being a more junior candidate, you get a feel for the person you're working with. And also, as someone coming from another industry as well, the interview process for tech is so different that like any insight into like what it would actually look like is always helpful. Yeah, so it's probably my preferred method, to be honest.
And when you were in those interviews, was it literally your line manager, or the person who would have been your line manager most of the time? Was it someone from within the team?
Yeah, often not the line manager, because that would usually be like product manager, I guess, most of the times, but like someone senior developer usually. And oftentimes they just pick a question from like, there's a website called like Code Kata, which is a bit like Leak Code, or they pick like a Leak Code question and they do that, or they'd have something like pre-prepared.
Excellent. Great, and I come over to you on this, Mark. What's your take on pair programming? Is it something you guys use? Is it something that you feel adds a lot of value?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like olives, really. Some like them, some don't. And I think within our business, some hiring managers, and again, I'm sorry, folks, kind of on the fence here, but some managers love pair programming, and some, I wouldn't say they dislike it, they're not interested in it really, because I guess they feel that they can eke the answers out of interview questions, as opposed to a kind of live exercise. So yeah, I definitely see there's a place for pair programming. I think if I was a candidate, I would prefer that approach. And again, it just gives that little bit of assurance that for example, you've been sent a coding exercise directly, and if you get it wrong, you might think, well, God, I've got no opportunity to explain myself, or I might just have made a little error. You do the pair programming, then the individuals in the panel can be like, oh, actually, I can see you've done X, Y, Z. Did you mean to do that? And then it just gives the candidate the opportunity to show themselves in the best possible light. So I'm for them. But yeah, it's some do, some don't.
Fantastic.
That's a roundabout answer.
No, and look, I think that is pretty fair enough when it comes to a lot of this. It is very much horses for courses. I think I personally do think there is a big benefit to pair programming. I think a lot of the feedback we get from candidates, if it's done in the right way, if it's done in a kind of non-threatening way, if it's done in a very collaborative way, I think that really does give candidates a good experience of what it would feel like on a day-to-day to sit next to that person and write some code. As I said, if it's done in a bit more of a kind of looking over your shoulder, waiting for you to make a mistake kind of way, then I think you kind of encourage mistakes, and it can be an issue.
I completely agree with that. I think it's the same though with any kind of interaction you have with the candidate. It's about the impression you leave, and if you don't make that candidate feel warm and welcome, then the interview isn't really going to go well. Anyway, so whether that's values-based competency, whether that's pair programming, whether that's it's a candidate first.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. And Hannah, I think the last time we caught up, you mentioned that you do pair program within the business, not necessarily in the interview process. So yeah, it'd be great to get your take on it as well.
Yeah, so again, there's definitely a place for things like pair programming. We don't tend to use it a huge amount in our recruitment processes. We have done previously, or things similar, especially early careers when we were having face-to-face assessment days where we might do, I don't know, a little training session on Python, then everyone would try and build a Python calculator, and then you'd have a chance to sit with one of our trainers, one of our subject matter experts, where again, you can go through and say, well, I can see what you've done there, explain to me why we've done it. So it's not you haven't got the pass mark, it's not a right or wrong. So, but that was where we were trying to engage understand someone's capability in our early careers. Most of our hiring managers do prefer the Q&A at a more senior level, because you can eke out some of the experience, some of the questions. We use it a huge amount actually in our development, because we have a huge amount of early careers that are then buddied up with more experienced people, and that I think gives great experience to more junior people. I think as a business, the challenge with doing something like pair programming really is scalability at the scale that QA recruit for and that we look for. We know how precious our technical resources are, and really, if I'm gonna, and like Alan said, if he's having to do the same interview over and over again, and it goes into the hundreds, really, can we afford that time? Is it scalable? And so that, as again, the way that we've built it is we've built more sort of capability and aptitude tests at that earlier level, to really mitigate for some of that, I think. And we do want to make sure it's engaging for an individual. Pair programming can be absolutely terrifying if you get asked a question that you don't know what to do. And so it is finding that sort of balance. But again, like Mark says, I have some hiring managers and some end clients that absolutely love it. And we just make sure it's done. It's great if it's done in the right way, but it's not something that we use a huge amount. But that's not to say that we wouldn't, or if people do, it's not. It's a preference, I guess, and finding the right kind of interview techniques. I imagine most businesses and individuals will go through various different interview techniques in their careers.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, great take on it. Just looking at some of the questions that we've had in. So I think one of them, I'm happy to take, just given, pair programming doesn't seem to be something that's defined in either the interview processes we've discussed. So just in terms of when you would do a pair programming session, so I think typically what we see on our side is they'll be done either as a second last or the very last stage, normally when you're face-to-face on site, or not at the moment, but doing it the face-to-face kind of screen share. I think it is a lot of commitment. Obviously, you're talking an hour or 2 hours in terms of the task. I think if you were to try and get someone to do that pair programming as a very first stage, you have the same issues that we've already discussed about sending out a tech test at that very first stage. I think you do want people to be a little bit bought in by the time they're doing that. But like I said, I do think it's a really good way to get some insight into the ways of working. So we've had another really interesting question come in. So when would you skip part of the interview process if needed? So if you had, for example, a star candidate or an urgent role, or a candidate is going to go off the market quite quickly, we've been asked, would you kind of compromise on your process for that? Hannah, start with you.
At early careers, if I'm being honest, probably not. We've built our early careers recruitment process to be as fast as the individual wants to do it. I guess some of the things that individuals do before a recruiter, would speak to them, could take as little as half an hour to an hour to go through our assessments, with an interview at the end of it, and it can be the next day. So we've built our process to be scalable and quick. If it was someone, I don't know, that was a really desirable, maybe more senior, we've been headhunting for this position, would we skip some processes? I wouldn't. It's tricky to say. The answer is probably not. We'd want to have a fair and unbiased recruitment process for everybody. But if a recruitment process is particularly onerous, let's say that the end hiring manager wants 4 stages, I guess that's sort of down to the internal recruiters and, to really understand why we need that. And is there something that really isn't necessary? Because we do have, like anyone, there are hiring managers and clients that have their own processes, so it's really picking those apart. But I guess it's having those conversations at an earlier stage, because we want a candidate to feel engaged. We don't want a candidate to lose interest, because I've seen recruitment processes that can take months, and you do lose people. So it's a fine balance in that. But would we take out some of our strengths-based questions, behavior-based questions, because someone is saying, well, I'm going to take a job elsewhere unless you talk to me today? Then the answer is actually, does that fit with our culture and what we're looking for anyway? Perhaps not. We move as fast as we can based on the individual, so I'm not saying there isn't any wiggle room, but I wouldn't necessarily take out processes. I would try and speed them up.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to necessarily compromise.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting point, I think, on the stages. So it'd be interesting to go over to someone on the candidate side on this. So maybe Alan, in your experience, have you found companies where actually you were quite interested, but they just dragged their heels so much and it took so long just to even get through that process that you end up dropping out and missing out on that?
Yep. There's times, so there's, in the area I was before, there was quite a lot of US companies. They had a lot of hoops going through. I think one of them had like a reputation of a 9-hour interview.
Yeah.
I just didn't reply when those recruiters reached out. So, yeah, I want to speak to people that know what they want, and if they've got a lot of cruff around the interview process, I think they've probably got a lot of cruff around their dev process and everything else, and it's probably not a match. When I was on the trying to recruit, I tended to, the last couple of roles I've actually been trying to find hands teeth, Go developers in areas like even going back a couple of years where Go wasn't as common as it is now. So it's, yeah, you try and cut that process right down, so it's quick as possible, but the same for everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. And then Mark, just to touch on the first point, would you compromise on your process for the sake of getting a superstar, let's say?
No, I actually I'm completely aligned with what Hannah was saying. You've got to have a fair, unbiased approach to recruitment. So you can't have one process for one candidate for one role, and then a different approach to another candidate for the same role. That's completely unfair, and actually you won't be able to get the right results from that interview. And again, going by what Hannah said, if we did have a process that was 3 stages or 4 stages, and we had a star candidate, then yeah, we could speed up the process if required. But the candidate's going through the same process as the other candidates. We have streamlined processes in the past, and actually more recently we had a 4-stage, and that sounds awful. It doesn't sound as bad as it is, but we've taken it down to 3, so incorporated 2 aspects into one. Again, so the candidates are still going through the same line of process. So no compromise.
No, and I think that is a totally fair point. I think you've both hit the nail on the head there. It's about looking at your process overall. Is the process stopping you hiring? Then great. Whether they're a superstar or not, then you want to cut that down to make sure you've got the best opportunity of hiring everyone that you initially get a request out to. You never want your process to become a blocker to hiring. If it does, you're going to need to look at that and make some changes. Excellent. And then just final thoughts from Tom and Alex. So Tom, in your experience, what's it been like? How many stages were there for your most recent interview process? Oh, you're on mute there, mate.
I knew I'd be got once. It's usually 4, pretty similar to what Mark and Hannah have said. But yeah, I was just thinking about what Alan said about really long interview processes, and I had one with a local insurance company that I applied for in December, and they got back to me like March 1st, and the timescale was just so large that I couldn't possibly have made that like an option. I think as well on like timescales, I quite like it being relatively long, but over maybe 2 to 3 weeks, because you want the opportunity to know the company as well. You don't necessarily want to be rushed through like 2 interviews and then have to make a decision.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. I think that time to mull it up, and the time to explore different options as well. I think it's easy to, the first thing comes along and you think, oh, I need a job. Let's look in this. Actually, having different options and experience in different companies and speaking to different companies definitely formulates in your own mind what you're looking for a little bit more. Like you can learn while you're on the job hunt, I think, a little bit. Excellent. And then Alex, final thoughts from you. Just in terms of that most recent interview process you went through, what was the kind of length of it, and did you have any challenges when it came to getting through that process in time?
So the whole interview process from start to end.
Yeah. So how many stages did they have in the interview?
I think roughly 4.
Okay.
So maybe the very first point of contact was just a phone call or a message, maybe started by the HackerJob platform, just to like touch base and see what I wanted if I'm looking, and just a brief chat about my experience. And then the second stage was an actual hour interview with the tech team I'd be working with.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third stage was the take-home test, which I did. And the fourth stage was the final interview,
Okay.
which was a bit longer. Yeah.
Fantastic. Excellent. So that intro conversation to find out a little bit, and the technical assessments in the middle, and then the final bit. And the final round, that was part culture fit and part technical assessment, I would imagine.
Yeah, so I think most of the final interview was taken up with the technical assessment. So there are a few different technical assessments in the final interview. And then somewhat at the end also was a cultural fit. But before that interview also, they had some, I don't know, more personal interview questions in the previous interview, I think.
Fantastic. Excellent. Great. So that's it for today's webinar. Just like to apologize for my slightly rushed start to it. Jumped straight off another call onto this. But thank you very much for listening in. So in terms of any of the other questions that we haven't got around to, we will try and answer those afterwards. So please keep an eye on your emails. Tomorrow's session will be on the perks and benefits that matter most. So please do tune in to find out a little bit more about what it is, both from the company side and the candidate side, that we're looking for when it comes to an overall benefits package. As mentioned at the start, if you do join for 4 out of the 5 sessions this week, you will be invited to the HackerJob Wine Club. And as always, keep an eye on your emails for the link coming out for tomorrow's email. But thank you very much to all of our panelists today. And yeah, to all of you, have a great day out there.
Have a good one, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.